The glass didn't break when I dropped it. It just spun on the tile like it was mocking me, wobbling on its side, leaving a trail of red wine like a question mark near my foot. She stared at it for a second. Then she looked at me like I was the mess. "Don't touch me. You look ridiculous." She said it like she was commenting on the weather. The table was still set. The chicken was still warm. The wine was expensive. I'd made a playlist, printed a menu, even put her favorite sweater over her chair because she always complained about the draft from the hallway. None of that mattered. She didn't even sit. She walked in, stood there, let her eyes scan the room like she was scoring a hotel room she didn't plan to stay in, and then dropped that line like a blade. "Don't touch me. You look ridiculous." My hand was still outstretched when she turned her back. Not just from me, from everything. I didn't say a word at first. I just listened. To the wine dripping. To the silence after. To something breaking inside me that wasn't the glass. I said, "You're not worth this." And she stopped. But she didn't turn. She laughed. That tiny, silent kind of laugh that people do when they know something you don't. Like I was late to a joke that had been running for months. She walked out, closed the door like it was any normal Tuesday. And I sat down. Not on the chair, on the floor. Next to the wine. Next to the trail of red. Next to the version of myself that still thought tonight would save something. I don't know what time it was when I got up. I don't remember when I opened her laptop. Or how long I stared at the email titled after Monaco kiss mark. But I remember the subject line of the next one. Does he still think it's just yoga on Wednesdays? There were over 40 of them. All archived. All recent. All sent under a name I didn't recognize. But I would recognize the face and the attachments. And the place in the background. And what she was wearing. Because it was my hoodie. In our bed. With someone else's hand wrapped around her. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't cry either, which somehow felt worse. I just sat at the kitchen table with her laptop in front of me, the screen dimming every few minutes, waiting for me to give up. But I didn't. I clicked every thread, opened every attachment, watched and read until my body felt numb and my mouth tasted like metal. Some of the emails were mundane, logistics, complaints, emoji-laced jokes about how I still had no clue. But others were clinical in how cold they were. Exact dates, hotel names, nicknames I'd never heard her use, password-protected links, receipts. Everything I wasn't supposed to find was just sitting there, like it had been waiting for me, like she wanted me to see it eventually. But not yet. Not until the right kind of damage could be done. That hoodie, the one in the photo. I thought it was mine. I thought I'd lost it months ago. Turns out, I hadn't lost it. She had packed it in a duffel bag I never saw, worn it in a hotel room I'd never entered, and smiled in it like it was just another thing she took from me that I'd never get back. At 4:13 a.m., I sent myself everything. Screenshots, files, forwarded emails. Then I wiped her laptop clean. Not because I wanted to protect her, but because I wanted to control something for once. She didn't come home that night. Or the next. At 6:42 p.m. the following evening, I got a text. "We should talk. I'll come by tomorrow." No apology. No explanation. No guilt. I didn't reply. I made tea. I fed the fish. I sat on the couch and stared at a candle I didn't light. The next day, I went to work like nothing had happened. I filed reports. Smiled at Barbara in HR. Ate a granola bar at my desk like I wasn't unraveling inside. That's what people like me do. We internalize. We behave. We rot politely. When I got home that evening, her car was in the driveway. She was in the living room, legs crossed, sipping one of my craft beers like it belonged to her. She didn't even look up when I walked in. "You saw it," she said flatly. Not a question. Not an apology. Just a statement of fact. I stood there. My keys still in my hand. My backpack halfway sliding off my shoulder. "I saw everything," I said. She nodded, like I'd just confirmed the delivery of a package. Like she'd been expecting it. And then she said something I'll never forget. Something that shifted this entire situation into something far darker than I thought possible. "It was never really about you, Larson. Don't make this about you." That's when I realized she wasn't sorry. Not even close. Because this wasn't an accident. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was deliberate. And I was starting to understand just how deep this went. But I had no idea who else was involved. Not yet. I didn't respond to her. Not right away. She stayed seated on the couch like she was hosting a book club, like we were going to have an adult conversation about us and move on from the nuclear crater she'd left in my chest. She had this way of making betrayal look like a mutual misunderstanding, like I'd just misread the situation or missed a silent memo. She said again, calmly this time, "Don't make this about you, Larson." I finally set my bag down on the floor, stared at her for a long moment, and asked what any idiot husband would ask after finding out his wife of 8 years had been cheating for months. "Who is he?" She didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She just took another sip of my beer, and said the name like she was ordering coffee. "Keaton." I froze. Not because I knew the name, but because I didn't. I've been to every one of her work parties, every holiday mixer, every dinner with her friends. That name had never come up. Not once. "Keaton who?" I asked, and immediately hated myself for sounding like a desperate teenager. She tilted her head, slightly amused. "Why does that matter now?" I didn't answer. I just stood there while she finally stood up, walked past me like a breeze, and paused by the doorway as if she were the guest, not the one who'd turned my life inside out. Before she left, she turned back and said, "He said you'd eventually find out. He just didn't think you'd take this long." And then she left, just like that. That sentence stuck with me like a splinter in the brain. He said you'd eventually find out. Like this was coordinated. Like I was the last person to see the map, while everyone else had already played the game. It didn't feel like an affair anymore. It felt like something orchestrated. I didn't sleep again that night. Instead, I pulled up the photo I'd saved, the one where she was in my hoodie, in our bed, next to the hand I hadn't recognized. I zoomed in, checked the reflection in the mirror behind her. There was a sliver of a face, half-shadowed, enough to make out a jawline, part of a shoulder. It wasn't familiar, not right away, but it was male. And he had a scar, faint but visible, running just under his left eye. I stared at it for a long time. That detail, that scar, something about it gnawed at me. The next morning, I went to the gym for the first time in months. Not to work out, just to look around. And that's when I saw him, by the water fountain, talking to someone at the counter. Scar under the eye, same build, same energy, laughing at something like his life was untouched. Keaton. But it wasn't just that. Standing next to him, holding a smoothie, was someone I did know, Logan, my coworker, the guy who sat 3 cubicles down from me, the guy who always gave me those long, sympathetic glances every time I mentioned Greta. Suddenly, things made a sick kind of sense. This wasn't just about my wife. This wasn't just about Keaton. There was more. And apparently, Logan had known all along, which meant I'd been a running joke, at work, at home, maybe even in places I hadn't thought to look yet. I wasn't just cheated on. I was being played, and I was finally starting to figure out by who. I stood there at the edge of the gym floor, pretending to tie my shoe as I watched Keaton and Logan laugh about something I'd never be part of. They didn't see me. Or maybe they did, and just didn't care. Either way, their ease cut deeper than any truth I thought I'd uncovered. It wasn't just the scar that confirmed it. It was the way Keaton reached over and grabbed Logan's shoulder, the exact same gesture I saw in the photo, the one Greta tried to crop out. That hand, that grip, the familiarity of it. That's when the sick realization hit me. These men weren't strangers to each other. They weren't even just acquaintances. They were comfortable. Like this wasn't new. Like this wasn't just about my wife. On my drive home, I kept asking myself a single, looping question. How many people were in on this? I used to believe betrayal was a 2-person crime. Now it felt like a group project I'd accidentally wandered into as the punchline. I started retracing everything. Dinner parties, passing comments, inside jokes I didn't understand at the time. Greta always used to say I was slow to pick up on things. I thought she meant directions, sarcasm, movie plots. Now I wondered if she meant this. Back at home, I opened a folder on my desktop I hadn't touched in years, anniversary videos. That's where I stored all our home recordings. Not romantic ones, just normal, boring moments, vacations, birthdays, weekends cooking in the kitchen. I wasn't even sure why I opened it, but something told me to look. I clicked on one from last year's New Year's Eve party. It was filmed in our living room, guests blurry in the background, Greta in the foreground holding a sparkler and a glass of champagne. I scanned the faces behind her. Logan was there. I paused the video at timestamp 13 minutes and 47 seconds. Logan was handing a drink to someone who looked just out of frame. And when I advanced it frame by frame, there he was, Keaton, standing half in the shadows, laughing at something Greta had just whispered to him. That night, she told me he was Madison's date. Madison, her college friend I never got along with. The girl who once called me terminally boring after a wine tasting. I assumed she brought some random guy. Turns out, that was just the story Greta gave me. Everything about that night had been a lie. And then I remembered the napkin. The one I found in my jacket weeks ago. Lipstick and a number. I went into the drawer where I'd stuffed it away, unfolded it again. The number was local. I searched it. Nothing came up right away, but I recognized the last 4 digits. I'd seen them flash across Greta's phone once when she was texting someone named L, a name I now knew was fake. I called it. It rang once, then twice. Then a voice answered. Not Greta, not Madison. A man. Hello, he said, casual, relaxed. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just breathed. L, he asked again, more cautious this time. I hung up. Something wasn't adding up anymore. Greta's affair wasn't just emotional. It wasn't just physical. There were too many moving parts. Too many people. Too many fake names, numbers, and rewritten stories. This wasn't a secret fling. It felt like something coordinated. The worst part? I wasn't even angry yet. I was fascinated. It was like waking up mid-experiment and realizing you're not the scientist. You're the subject. And I was just starting to learn how long the experiment had been running. I never planned to go to Madison's apartment. It wasn't some dramatic revenge plot or grand move. I didn't even know what I was looking for. It just started with a thought, a tiny flicker of curiosity that turned into obsession. What if Madison knew everything? What if her apartment held the pieces Greta left out? Madison was away for the weekend. I knew because Greta had mentioned it offhandedly a few days earlier during one of her colder-than-usual conversations. Madison's going to Lake Geneva with her new guy. Don't text her. She's off-grid. She said it like a command. Back then I barely registered it. Now it felt like an opportunity. The thing is, I'd been in Madison's apartment before. Once, years ago, when Greta forgot her charger and sent me to pick it up. Madison gave me a key from her lockbox under the second stairwell. I remember it because I thought it was weird anyone would keep a key hidden so close to their front door. Apparently, she still did. So there I was, Saturday, 1:30 p.m., sun out, pretending everything was fine, walking up to her building with nothing but a pair of sunglasses and a lie I told myself. I'm just going to look around for 5 minutes. Then I'll leave. The key still worked. The second I stepped inside, something felt wrong. Not criminal, not dangerous. Just off. Like the air wasn't stale enough for someone who'd been gone for 2 days. Like someone had been there more recently than she claimed. There was an open water bottle on the counter. A fresh lemon on the cutting board. No dust on the piano keys. I walked quietly, almost apologetically, down her hallway. The place smelled like lavender and wood polish, too clean. Then I saw it. On the desk in the corner of her bedroom. A printed sheet of paper with 2 names written on it in bold. Larson V. Subject number 4. Greta M. Handler, active. Below that were 4 columns labeled. Timeline. Exposure level. Notes. Escalation risk. What the hell was I reading? My name was typed in clean, deliberate font, next to notes like delayed reaction to marital disruption, likely emotional dependency. Subject unaware of secondary relationship triangulation. Minimal confrontation instinct. Prolonged observation recommended. Handler? Observation? Escalation risk? There were 3 other names above mine, each with red marker lines drawn through them. Subject number 1, full disengagement. Subject number 2, compromised. Subject number 3, self-exit. I stood there for I don't know how long, staring at my own life summarized like an experiment. Like I wasn't a person. Like I was part of some clinical case study no one ever told me I signed up for. I dug further. Opened drawers. A folder labeled Keaton held photographs I didn't want to see. Him and Greta, yes. But also him with Madison. Him with other women. Sometimes in hotels. Sometimes in rooms that looked like studios. Cameras set up in the corner. Everything labeled. Numbered. Dated. It wasn't an affair. It was a project. And I wasn't the first. When I heard a door creak in the hallway, not mine, I froze. I wasn't alone. A shadow passed under the front door. Then footsteps retreated. They hadn't knocked. They had just checked to see if the door was locked. I gathered what I could, 2 pages, 3 photos, and left the apartment the same way I came in. I drove home in silence, hands trembling, my heartbeat in my ears louder than the engine. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel betrayed. I felt used. And I still didn't know what the endgame was. But I was starting to suspect this had nothing to do with love. 3 days passed, and I didn't hear from Greta. Not a call, not a text, not even one of her passive-aggressive emails about bills or the dog she hadn't asked about in weeks. Madison, unsurprisingly, was still off the grid, but her apartment was just as clean and untouched as I'd left it, except for the folder I'd hidden, which was now gone. I hadn't taken everything that day. I'd left the bulk of the documents in the back of her wardrobe, under a shoebox of foreign coins and expired travel passes. I wanted to see if anyone would notice. Someone had. They were gone. It wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It wasn't just about sex, or lies, or secret photos. There was a design to this, a structure. I felt like a pawn who'd wandered off script, and someone behind the curtain was rewriting the rules to get me back under control. I didn't go to work. I didn't eat much. My phone buzzed occasionally with random messages from people who weren't involved, co-workers asking if I was sick, an uncle inviting me to some reunion I'd never attend. None of it mattered. My world had condensed into 3 names: Greta, Keaton, Madison, and the unanswered question, what the hell is subject number 4 supposed to become? On Thursday, I decided to go back to the gym. Not to confront Keaton. Not yet. I just needed to see if he was still real. If this whole thing wasn't just a breakdown, a projection of my collapsing mind. I parked across the street, sat in my car with the engine running, and waited. That's when I saw her. She couldn't have been more than 25, maybe younger. Pale skin, short black hair, red hoodie, denim skirt, combat boots. She looked like someone who didn't belong in this part of town. Too sharp for the yoga moms, too focused for the students. She stood on the corner across from the gym, one hand in her pocket, the other gripping a plastic coffee cup she wasn't drinking from. She looked straight at me. I thought I imagined it at first. But then she crossed the street without hesitation, walked right up to the passenger window, and tapped. I didn't move. She tapped again. Against every sane instinct I had, I lowered the window an inch. "You're Larson," she said. I didn't answer. I wanted to deny it, but my name sounded right coming from her mouth, like she wasn't asking. Like she knew. "I don't have long," she said, glancing behind her. "You don't know what this is. You think you do, but you're wrong." "Who are you?" I asked, voice dry. She reached into her hoodie, pulled out a flash drive, and dropped it on the seat through the gap in the window. "Watch it somewhere safe. Not at home. Not on your phone. No Wi-Fi. No Bluetooth. Nothing." Before I could ask anything else, she turned and walked off. I called after her. She didn't turn around. I didn't follow. I just stared at the flash drive like it was radioactive. I drove to my brother's lake house an hour away. He hadn't used it in years, and it had no smart tech, just an old desktop PC he left behind when he moved overseas. It took me 20 minutes to work up the nerve to plug in the drive. There was only one folder on it. No labels. No explanation. Just 5 video files. The first one opened with surveillance footage, not street camera stuff. Hidden camera footage. Interior shots. Rooms I recognized. My living room. My bedroom. My bathroom. In some of the clips, Greta wasn't even in them. But Keaton was. And sometimes, so was Madison. Not together. Always separate. But always comfortable. Like they'd been there many times before. The second file was worse. It wasn't just video. It was interviews. Clips of Greta in front of a static, gray backdrop, answering questions I couldn't hear. She looked relaxed. Confident. At one point, she even laughed. Then, in the third file, I saw something that made my hands go numb. It was me. From months ago. Sitting in my car. At a stoplight. Filmed from the back seat. The camera had been in my car. I watched myself for 3 minutes, completely unaware. Then the screen went black. The fourth and fifth files were encrypted. I didn't know how to open them. I didn't try. I just sat there in the dark, the sound of lake water slapping against the dock in the background, trying to slow my breathing. This wasn't a love affair. This wasn't a betrayal. This was surveillance. I wasn't part of a relationship. I was part of something else. And if that girl in the red hoodie was right, I'd already waited too long to figure out what. I didn't sleep that night at the lake house. Every sound outside made me flinch. I kept the curtains closed, lights off, and the flash drive hidden under a floorboard I pried loose with a butter knife. Something about those last 2 encrypted files had me on edge, not just because I couldn't open them, but because I suddenly wasn't sure I should. Still, by morning, curiosity won. I sat back down at the old desktop, reopened the folder, and clicked on the first locked file. A password prompt appeared. I stared at the blinking cursor. I typed my middle name. It was a stupid guess. Something instinctive. Something emotional. But the moment I hit enter, the screen went black for 2 seconds. Then the video began playing. No loading. No delay. Like it had been waiting for me specifically. It opened with a close-up of a document. Not a contract. Not a report. A profile. Mine. Larson Vaughn. DOB, phone number, address, employment history, medical records. Even things I'd forgotten, like the name of my first therapist from 10 years ago, and the prescriptions I only filled once. At the bottom, in red font, risk level, passive, duration, 17 months. Projected outcome, isolation, intervention, displacement. Displacement? Then came the real gut punch. Another document flashed onto the screen, titled Romantic Catalyst Approval, Greta M. It was signed, dated 2 years ago. Greta didn't stumble into an affair. She was assigned to me. There was an entire list of approved interventions. Phrases to trigger emotional responses. You look ridiculous was literally on the list. I felt sick. I couldn't breathe. I paused the video, got up, walked outside, sat on the freezing concrete steps, staring at nothing. This wasn't just betrayal. This was engineered. But why? I didn't want to go back inside, but I had to know. When I returned, I played the final encrypted file. It asked for a password again. This time, I didn't guess. I backed out. Instead, I did something reckless. I connected the lake house desktop to Wi-Fi. Just for a second. Long enough to run a reverse search on the girl in the red hoodie. I had nothing but the security footage from outside the gym, which I screen captured and enhanced as best I could. I ran it through an old image tool I knew from work. 30 seconds later, a match. Name, Elora Quinn. Age, 24. Former intern, Halvorin Institute. I froze. That name, Halvorin, was in the metadata of the video files. She didn't just find the drive. She stole it. And if she was willing to risk giving it to me, it meant she wasn't running anymore. She was fighting back. I found Elora again 6 days later. She didn't reach out. I just knew where to look. After running her name, I searched every forum and off-the-grid subreddit I could find tied to the Halvorin Institute. Most of them were dead ends, half-abandoned threads filled with paranoia and bad grammar. But one post stood out. Just a single sentence. The exit is always where they made you enter. It made no sense until I remembered the gallery. Greta had dragged me to it 2 years ago. Some obscure exhibit in a concrete bunker with experimental sound installations and emotional immersion themes. I hated it. She loved it. Said it was so real it felt curated. I went back alone, and Elora was there. Not hiding. Sitting calmly on a bench, hood down this time, watching people come and go. She saw me before I said a word. You opened the first one, she said. I wasn't sure you would. I sat beside her, slowly, like it was the first normal moment I'd had in months. You picked my middle name as the password, I said. She gave the faintest smile. You'd be surprised how often people don't remember what matters about themselves. We talked for 2 hours. Maybe 3. I don't know. She told me everything. How Halvorin wasn't a government agency, but something worse. Private, unregulated, technically legal. They didn't target people for revenge or blackmail. They targeted emotional outliers. People who slipped through the cracks of modern connection. People who could be isolated and studied. They didn't want your money, she said. They wanted your patterns. How long it would take you to break. What kind of grief turns into action. How dependency evolves. Greta had been hired, trained, paid. Not just to manipulate, but to map my reactions in real time. Every fight, every silence, every breakdown I thought was real was part of their timeline. Logan? He was a secondary observer. Madison? A contingency. Keaton? A control subject. I asked Elora why she helped me. Why now? She looked tired when she answered. Because I used to be part of it. I ran simulation models. Until I became subject number 9. She'd escaped a year earlier. Stole evidence. Went underground. But she never stopped watching. She said I was the first one who didn't self-destruct or disappear. The first one who walked out on his own. You're not broken, she said. You're awake. When I drove home that night, I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt clean. Not healed. Not whole. But real. The house was still the same. Quiet. Empty. Moby was still alive somehow, swimming in gentle circles like nothing had happened. I fed him. Sat on the floor. Breathed. Then I did something small, something that mattered. I deleted every photo of Greta. Not with rage, not in spite, just as a way of saying, I get to start now. 2 months later, I moved to a different city. Got a new job, something low pressure. I hike more now, read paper books. I learned how to be bored again, without panic. Elora and I still email sometimes. No romance. Just strange, honest conversations between two people who saw the edge and came back with the blueprint. I'm not special. I was a subject once. But now I'm just me. And for the first time in years, that's enough.